All right, man, peace. So, brothers, this is going to be the aftermath video for the welterweight showdown that occurred at Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York last night between WBA super welterweight champion Keith one-time Thurman and Josesito, the Riverside Rocky Lopez. The fight pretty much went how I thought it was going to go, even though I did not quite see Keith Thurman getting as hurt as he was, but it did not shock me because it was his first fight back after a 2-year layoff, or an almost 2-year layoff. I will say this, Keith Thurman definitely did not look as sharp as he normally looks. He was not as explosive. His punches lacked the snap that they normally have. There was a loss in punch velocity, and he did seem kind of awkward. What saved him when he got wobbled in round 7 was his great boxing IQ. He's a very intelligent person and a very intelligent boxer, and that saved him. And also, of course, his conditioning, because he took a lot of hard left hooks and right hands both to the body and head in the 7th round. And the only thing that saved him was that he had great legs, and he was also very, very tough. And he knew when to hold every once in a while, even though he did get beat around the ring a bit too much. I have to give a lot of credit to Josesito Lopez, who did show up, who normally shows up in most of his fights. He never goes down without a fight. This bout, he was able to take Thurman's best shots. He was certainly in the best shape I've ever seen him in, particularly with his stamina. But I will say this, Lopez just has the worst natural physique of any trained championship level boxer that I've ever seen. I mean, that dude has a dad bod if I've ever seen one, but that's beside the point. He deserves a great deal of credit. He had great heart. He got knocked down in the 2nd round, got up and kept fighting. But at the end of the day, that's what he's supposed to do. That's why he's the Riverside Rocky. Rocky always gets up off the canvas. So the question is, what is next for Keith one-time Thurman? They asked him after the bout if he would consider fighting Manny Pacquiao. He said, at first, he said, I have to check with my management team. That normally is code word for, that's normally code word for, hell no, right now I'm in a lot of pain. I don't even want to think about Pacquiao right now. And I was not impressed with my own performance, so I have to go back to the drawing board, watch the fight over, look at the mistakes that I made, and beg Al Heyman to see if I can get another tune-up fight before fighting Manny Pacquiao. And you guys have to understand this. A lot of these fighters are waiting on Keith Thurman. They're waiting on him because he's holding one of the belts. Shawn Porter is waiting on him. Manny Pacquiao, if he's unable to get the Mayweather fight, he'll most likely be waiting on Keith Thurman. We know that Errol Spence has been waiting on him for 5 years now. And like I mentioned in the last fight, Floyd Mayweather was able to execute a spectacular chess move on Keith Thurman, who was begging him for a fight in 2013. Floyd Mayweather first introduced the public to the understanding of how feared Errol Spence was in the welterweight division, even at that time. Because all Floyd Mayweather told Keith Thurman is that if you want to fight me, fight Errol first. And Keith Thurman understood, like I've stated in the past, even though the viewing public is not aware of who's who within that world, the boxing world, the basketball world, the hip-hop world, they know who's bubbling on the underground circuit, or as they would call it in the sports world, the amateur circuit. So Keith Thurman, he knew who Errol Spence was. He didn't have to hear reports about Errol Spence and Floyd Mayweather having wars and sparring to know how dangerous a fighter Errol Spence was and the predicament that he'd be putting himself into. And as I watched Josesito Lopez beat Keith Thurman around the ring in the 7th round, all I thought to myself was, if that was Errol Spence, Keith Thurman would be going to the hospital. He'd be going to the hospital. If that was Shawn Porter, Keith Thurman would have been going to the hospital. And that's why I stated that's not the same Keith Thurman. It wasn't just a great Josesito performance. That was a declining Keith Thurman. Now, was it a decline from injuries, or was it a decline from him having almost 2 years off? We'll find out in his next fight. But he was not the same fighter. That Keith Thurman last night would not have beat Danny Garcia. He would not have beat Shawn Porter. He certainly would not beat Errol Spence. So there better be a quantum leap in proficiency in Keith Thurman in his next fight, or he may consider hanging up the gloves. That would not surprise me. Because Keith Thurman is that type of guy that if he has $7-8 million in the bank, he'll throw up the deuces and he'll be out and you'll never see him again. He'll pop back up as a commentator somewhere. He's that type of guy. Keith Thurman does not strike me as a dude like a Manny Pacquiao who'll be fighting until he's 40, 45 years old. I think that he's too smart for that. But the Keith Thurman that I saw last night, very, very, very vulnerable. Very susceptible to a top-level fighter. And Lopez is not a top-level fighter at all. But when it comes to Josesito Lopez, what he did was make himself a viable candidate to be an opponent for many of these other top welterweight fighters. Don't be surprised to see Manny Pacquiao fight him. Don't be surprised to see Danny Garcia fight Josesito Lopez. I believe that Danny Garcia is fighting Adrian Granados, the fighter who just lost a little while ago to Adrian Broner. So clearly, Al Heyman is trying to build back up Danny Garcia. And that's why these fighters love Al Heyman, because he makes sure that they all get taken care of. He slots them properly. They have the championship level fighters, the contenders, and the opponents. And he always keeps recycling the same guys. He always gives them an opportunity to make some money. So, with Lopez's performance last night against Thurman, he's basically made himself a very, very viable opponent for most of the top guys at welterweight. It would not shock me if, while Errol Spence is waiting on Keith Thurman, that he fights Lopez. And we'll get a good chance to gauge Errol Spence's performance against a Josesito Lopez versus how Keith Thurman performed against Josesito Lopez. So, things just got a little spicier in the heavyweight division last night, now that we've seen that it appears that Keith Thurman is not quite the fighter that he was. Once again, we're going to have to check to see how much better or not better he is in his next fight to truly be able to evaluate what we saw last night. But anyway, peace.